And without further ado, I'll just let Miyoko talk about herself. But let's give it up again for Miyoko Schinner.
Thank you, Laura. This is Laura Verduzco, one of my friends, and I got to stand out of the way of the PowerPoint there because it's right in my eyes there. And she was one of the fabulous testers for my new book, The Homemade Vegan Pantry. And this is the first year of the San Francisco Vegetarian Society under new leadership, Greg and Patley. Greg Rohrbach is the president. So let's give them, the new reign, a big round of applause. So, anyway, under new leadership, we know that it's going to keep growing and it's going to become a huge movement here. And I've got, Howard is going to be doing the PowerPoint presentation for me. So I'm going to just be going like this, or signaling, or going yoo-hoo, or something, every time I want you to move forward. So anyway, the San Francisco Vegetarian Society asked me to come back this year, and they asked me to share my personal journey through all the vegan businesses that I've had for the last almost 30 years. And so I said, sure. And this is a really, really exciting time. So I call it the new V-Conomy, because this is the future of food. This is where we are going as a world because we have to. Because the alternative is completely unsustainable. Can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So, and I think someone's phone is ringing. All right, so here's the future of vegan food, and how fast are we going to get there? How fast do we have to get there? Right now, I don't think, it may be hard to see this, but what we're finding is that traditional foods have just totally flatlined. There is no growth in traditional grocery anymore. But in 2014, 7% of all new food products were vegan. 7%. That is huge. Now there's a tipping point at about 10%. When something reaches about 10%, whether it's a number of vegans in this country, which doubled in 2012, and apparently in certain countries like Italy, the number of vegans has now reached 10%. That is the tipping point when awareness takes over and it becomes truly mainstream and acceptance becomes huge. And that is really the key, is that we need to get more and more vegan businesses out there. We need more and more vegan products out there in the world, because the more you see it, the more acceptance there is in the world by everyday people. When I started 30 years ago, you had to explain what vegan meant to just about everybody. But today, veganism is going mainstream. 10% of millennials are vegan or vegetarian. So everyone who's coming into this world today, of that 10% is vegan. What's going to happen with the next generation? It's going to be even higher. 36% of Americans consume meat or dairy alternatives. 20% of all milk is now non-dairy milk. That's 20% of people, when they go and buy milk, instead of buying traditional dairy milk, they're choosing almond or soy or coconut or some alternative beverage. I mean, this is absolutely huge. This was unthinkable even 10 years ago. And there's been a 250% increase in the number of searches, according to Google, for the word vegan or vegetarian. So we know this is skyrocketing at an exponential rate, and it's going to increase more and more and more. So this is a wonderful time for you, each and every one of you, to start some sort of vegan business. Whether it's just blogging, selling something on the internet, starting your own little mom and pop shop, or selling something on Etsy, whether it's food or designing vegan fashion. This is made by this dress I'm wearing is by a vegan fashion designer in New York. Vegan shoes, whatever it is that you can do to help increase the speed at which veganism grows is something that's very, very positive for the world. So now I want to share a little bit about my own story. And when I think about it, there are many, many things that are involved in having your own vegan business. Next slide, please. So what does it take to become a vegan business owner? Well, the first thing is you have to be a creator. So I'm going to talk about all these points as we go on in the discussion in my talk. So I'm not going to labor on this right now. The next thing is to become a soldier. I'll tell you all about this. Next one is an ambassador, and finally, an evangelist. And we'll cover all of these things. So, when I think about how did I become all of those things 30 years ago, how is it I decided to start a vegan business? And I couldn't figure it out, like how I fell into all of this, because I was the furthest thing. I studied philosophy in college, and I did not ever think about starting businesses at all. And then I realized one night around 3 a.m. when I have all of my revelations, how it happened. Well, it all started in a dive sushi bar in Tokyo. So you can blame it on too much sake for sure. I had a friend right there. His name is Mr. Bon, and he was about 20, 30 years my senior, and we had a very platonic relationship. It was based on just discussions of philosophy. He was a businessman by day and a philosopher and writer by night. And we would go out to all these sushi bars and just talk about the meaning of life. But one night, what was on my mind was not the meaning of life, but the meaning of my life. What was I going to do with my life? I was in my mid-20s and I had not a clue where I was going. I was living in Tokyo and doing some translations and teaching some English and just sort of like going, doing a little bit of this, doing a little bit of that, and just having absolutely no direction whatsoever. And I was just distraught. And I was pondering, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? And Mr. Bond said to me, very, very wisely, you can do whatever you want. You can become a writer, you can go back to school, you can become an actor, do whatever you want, just don't go into business. So, about 3 weeks later, that's exactly what I did. I had been transitioning to a plant-based diet at the time, and that's fine. And I had been a vegetarian for a long time, and I'd begun to have some sort of intestinal issues and things, so I decided to give up milk, and I started to transition to a plant-based diet. I wasn't quite vegan, although I used that word vegan at the time. And it occurred to me, wow, you know what? I was a really good baker, because I was completely enamored with French cuisine. In Tokyo, there are more French restaurants than there are more Michelin-starred French restaurants than all of France put together, believe it or not. And so I made it my project to go from one French restaurant to another, trying every single vegetarian thing I could find. Vegetarian meant it was laden in dairy and eggs, lots and lots of rich, gooey, delicious cheese. Because nobody here likes cheese, I know, but I certainly did. And lots of dairy products and eggs. And I had just eaten myself to a point where I was, my cholesterol was really high and I just felt terrible all the time. And so I gave up the dairy, but I had very, very good baking skills. So I thought, well, why don't I try making some pound cakes and see if I can sell them. So this was the creator part. I had to listen to my heart. Whatever it is you want to do, don't listen to Mr. Bon. Don't let anyone tell you that you can't do something. If you have a passion for something, you must do it. That is your imperative. Especially in the vegan world, we need more and more people following a passion and making it come true. So listen to your heart. Anyway, so I lived in Tokyo, and I found this little old beaten-up bakery on the 3rd floor of a building that was about an hour and a half bus ride from my house. I actually had to take a subway and then get on a bus and then walk about 2 miles to get to this place. But I decided I was going to bake these pound cakes. And so I did. There was no car. And in order to take them to all the stores, I had to put them in that backpack. And I would put about 60 of them in that backpack. So the backpack was about 60 pounds, because a pound cake is a pound. And I would get on the subway and I would just deliver them all over town. And this is what I did to live out my passion. Next slide, please. So you must be a soldier in the beginning. I mean, in some ways, we live in this day and age where young people come up and they just sort of expect things. They come out of school and they just think, oh, I just have to do this and I'm going to be made really, really rich. I'm going to become an instant millionaire. I'm going to make, I'm going to be paid a really high salary. And sometimes it doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes you have to do something called pay your dues. And you have to schlep. And I can tell you, I have schlepped so much in my lifetime, just hauling things here and there to make it happen. Whatever it is, I heard Kai Risdall. He's the sexiest guy on the radio, I think. Last night, he was at the Commonwealth Club, and I heard him on NPR radio last night. He said if you're just getting started, or even if you're not just getting started, even if you've been doing it for a while, if someone asks you to do something, the answer is yes. The answer is always yes. You do what it takes to make your dream come true. And if you do that, your dreams will come true, whatever it might be. But you must say yes. You must soldier on. So, I soldiered on in Tokyo. Next slide, please. And way back then in Tokyo, I started making my dreams come true. Next thing you knew, I kept getting introduced to one person to another. And next thing you knew, I was designing menus for new restaurants in Tokyo. And I got I got these pop-up restaurants or bakeries. I was baking all these fancy cakes and things at department stores, in the basement of the department stores. I was doing cooking classes in nice cooking schools and department stores, and I was in my mid-20s, and it was whatever it was someone asked me to do, it was yes, I will be there, I can do it, and I was there, and I schlepped, and I did it, and everything was going absolutely wonderfully, and one day, I met this manager, or this owner, of this Indonesian restaurant in Tokyo, and he said, I'm going to make you rich, I'm going to make you famous in Tokyo, you and I are going to partner up, and I'll be your business manager, and we're going to open up this big vegan restaurant, and it's going to be so successful. And I thought, oh, my dreams were coming true. And I partnered up with him, and we started making plans. And back then, I used to do a few other things. I did my little translations, and I also sang a little jazz in nightclubs in Tokyo. I mean, just, really, I was just hustling like every other singer out there. And, not famous or anything. And then things got strange with this business partner. At first he said, I come back from one of my, $50 gigs, and he'd want half of that. Okay, sure. You want $25 in my $50 gig? Sure. I mean, we're talking yen, of course. So that was more like 2,500 yen or something like that. And he said and I was working on a book, and he said he wanted half the royalties, and he wanted half of this, and he wanted half of that. And I thought, this is awfully strange. This is very strange. I don't think this is going to work out. So I said, well, I don't think this is going to work out. And next thing you knew, someone was knocking on my door at 3 a.m. and the phone was ringing constantly, and there were threats made to my life. I kid you not. And I was told if I didn't do this, then my life was severely threatened. And then I talked to somebody, next slide please, and I discovered that he was related to the Yakuza. Anybody know what Yakuza are? This is Japanese mafia. This is a true story. Now, he wasn't one of those guys. That's just a picture I found on the internet. But these are these tattooed guys, and this is the Japanese mafia, and he was what's called Chimpira Yakuza, which is kind of like low-level Yakuza. And they're the ones that threaten things. And I went to the police, and I was scared for my life, and the police couldn't do anything about it, because they said, well, he hasn't actually killed you yet. Okay, so he can kill me, and then I can come to you, and you'll do something about him. And so this is lesson number 3. Next slide, please. You gotta know when to get out of Dodge. And I left Tokyo, and I came back to the United States. And this is a true story. I mean, it's almost laughable when I think about it, but at that point in my life, I was so scared. It was a very, very scary period, and this all really happened. But anyway, I got out of Dodge, I came back to the United States, and even though I had been on this wonderful trajectory, I realized I had to start from scratch all over again. And I came back to this beautiful city of San Francisco, where I started baking again, and I I started baking and selling my wares locally out of my kitchen. I was baking in my kitchen, and at this time there were no rules, no regulations. I could just go to Whole Foods and say, I got these great cakes. And they say, wow, that's wonderful, I'll buy them. And next thing you knew, I was just carting around my pastries all around the Bay Area in my Volvo station wagon. Next slide, please. And one thing led to another, and Bob out there in the book publishing company published my first book, The Now and Zen Epicure, in 1990. And I was baking these big, beautiful cakes that had tofu in them. They were all tofu cakes, because everything back in 1990 was made out of tofu, was it not? How many of you have been vegan that long, or vegetarian? And you put tofu in anything. Everything had tofu in it. That was just like a rule. If you were going to make something that was vegan, it had to have tofu. That was just the way it was. Well, anyway, one thing led to another. Next slide, please. And I met wonderful people, and once again, I was able to start making my dreams come true, which was a restaurant in San Francisco, the Now and Zen Bistro, which I started. How many of you went to Now and Zen? A good handful of you. All right, this is one of the first vegan restaurants in San Francisco, and as you can see, that was an article, that was a picture that was in Vegetarian Times, and I'm holding my belly because shortly after we decided to start this restaurant, I discovered I was pregnant with my second child. And about 3 months after we opened, I broke my bag of waters on the restaurant floor. And I was, during the lunch rush, and I was rushed off to the hospital. Now, what are the 3 most important things for starting a restaurant? Does anyone know? What are the 3 things you look for? Okay, so I chose a great location. I had been a single mom, and I had this 3-year-old kid at the time, and he was in a preschool. And this location was right across the street from the preschool. So that's how I chose this location. Out of convenience. Now, it was absolutely the wrong location. It was impossible to get there. It was in near Japantown. And I thought, oh, it's going to be a destination spot. It won't matter where it is. It's convenient for me. But of course, you know, that was absolutely the wrong way to decide where to open your restaurant. And the restaurant kind of muddled along, and, you know, people raved about it, people loved it, but we had one problem after another. I had one chef who, one night I got a phone call saying, Miyoko, you need to come down here right now because the chef just walked out the back door with all the burners on, which was true. Another time, I had to fire a chef who, because I kept getting complaints about the food being way too salty on a daily basis, and turned out this guy had developed a very strong heroin addiction. And then there was the manager who got into the car one time. He quit one night, and he basically got a cab and loaded up all the cases of wine and took off. And then, worst of all, was another manager who stole the car at night, we had a delivery van because we would deliver muffins and things to coffee shops, and he crashed the car, burned his apartment with his poor dog in the apartment, and it turned out this guy had been stealing from the till every single night, and it was just one thing after another, and I was about to tear my hair out. I was losing my mind. So I'd had one kid on the restaurant floor, as I mentioned earlier, and then then about 3 months after my child was born, I discovered I wasn't feeling so well, that I was pregnant yet again. I don't know what happened. I mean, I guess I was just super fertile. And so a year later, I had had another kid, and a week after I had my 3rd child, because I started out as a single parent, I was married by this time. A week after I had my 3rd child, the wonderful chef that we had, who was making everything go right, came knocking on my door at my house and said, I'm sorry, but I've just been diagnosed with an illness and I'm leaving next week. And so this is just kind of how it went. And nothing ever went right. Everything I touched, nothing turned to gold, it turned to dust. And I just couldn't understand it. And so, next slide, please. Anyway, business is like jazz. You just got to keep improvising. And I knew if I had to keep this thing going, I would. So at this time, we would serve this product called the Unturkey every Thanksgiving. It was this luscious turkey that was stuffed. It had a skin made out of yuba. It was delicious and succulent. And we used to sell these out of the restaurant. And someone said to me, you need to go to something called a Natural Products Expo and take your product. And I, of course, not knowing what the Natural Products Expo was, I just registered, paid the fee, and I went to Baltimore, Maryland with the Unturkey. And in one weekend, we wrote $50,000 worth of orders. And so I decided, okay, well then, I'm in the wrong business. So we sold the restaurant, and we started a natural food company. And I found this timeshare kitchen in South San Francisco so that I could sell these Unturkeys. And by the way, this was already at the end of September when I wrote these orders, and then I had to figure out how to get them to the East Coast within the next month. So I had to start writing. I kept calling this distributor and faxing orders. The distributor called me and said, stop faxing orders. We don't know who you are. We don't want your orders. Goodbye. But I just kept faxing them, and eventually they said, okay, fine, one time. We'll deliver your damn turkeys one time to the stores that ordered them, and then that's it. We don't want to hear from you ever again. But of course that didn't happen, because by then we had figured out how to make some other products, and we managed them to carry the other products as well. So, next slide, please. So this is the Unturkey right there, and we turned Now and Zen Restaurant into Now and Zen, the manufacturing company, and we made the Unturkey. We made the first non-dairy whip topping called Hip Whip. And then we had these meat substitutes, the unribs, the unsteakout. By the way, if you read my book, The Homemade Vegan Pantry, which is available in the bookstore, the recipe for the unsteakout and the unribs are in there. Because we don't make the product anymore. It's funny, I got those pictures because someone on Facebook posted them. I don't have the packages anymore. And someone just recently, a few months ago, just happened to post pictures of these two, of the unribs and the I guess they sure liked them. They kept the package for 10 years. It's very strange, but anyway. So the Hip Whip became the #1 leading non-dairy whip topping on the market at the time, and the Unturkey became the second leading turkey alternative at the time, behind Tofurkey. Now, the other thing, yes, Tofurkey, I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Yes, he was my great enemy. Oh yes, Tofurkey was 2 booths away from me at one of the natural product expos, and we would be seen sending spies back and forth to each other's booth, tasting little tidbits of each other's product to see which one was better, of course. That's what we did. But anyway, actually, I have to tell you that after we sold the Unturkey that very, very first season, and I was so bold, I got out of the timeshare kitchen, and I signed a lease for a 7,500 square foot facility off of 3rd Street. And then we moved there, and then I realized that I had another 9 months to go before I would have anything else to sell, because I didn't have another product. So that was a very brilliant move. However, one of my business partners said, oh, United Airlines, they're looking for a cookie and a cinnamon roll that's vegan and diabetic friendly. So I said, really? That's great. I'll just go into the kitchen and whip up a sample. It's exactly what I did, and I sent it into them. And a week later, United Airlines called and said, oh, can you make 10,000 of these every day? So I went out and bought a big oven and a packaging machine, and the next thing you knew, we were making cookies for United Airlines, cookies and cinnamon rolls. So none of that, I can ask my CFO, John Breen, who's sitting right there, if any of that would happen in today's world. Absolutely not. But back then, things just sort of happened. It was very, very bizarre. Next slide, please. All right, well, I was talking about my enemy, Seth Tibbett of Tofurkey. Was he a friend or was he a foe? Well, there he is, Seth Tibbett. Now, what is that little tree house there? I can tell you in the 1980s, when Seth Tibbett started Tofurkey, he lived in a tree house. You talk about a creator, you talk about a soldier, he did whatever it took to build that business, and he started out in that tree house making his product in some old funky schoolhouse. And what does the Tofurkey do now? It flies high above everybody. But here's the other important thing. Was he a friend or was he a foe? Next slide, please. He was a friend. Now, of course, in my mind, I thought perhaps he was a foe, but we were very, very diplomatic to each other. So we were both ambassadors of our product, of veganism, of what we were doing, because this is a mission-based business. The vegan space, the plant-based space, is one where we do it out of passion. We do it because there is a cause, because we do it because we have to save the world. Not individually, but collectively, as more and more businesses come together, because we have to. It's not sustainable otherwise. And because we knew that we were all doing something similarly important, we were friends. We weren't enemies. And the more you have competition, the better it is for you anyway. So we actually stayed friends. And what happened 20 years later after Now and Zen? Seth Tibbett, the founder and CEO of Tofurky, became one of the investors of Miyoko's Kitchen. Foe to friend, or perhaps always friends. So anyway, the story of Now and Zen was that what I just told you about, the Unturkey doing so well, and Hipwit doing so well, and the cookies doing so well, yes, it seemed like everything was aligned, but actually, it was just like the restaurant. Everything that could go wrong went wrong. This was Murphy's Law day after day after day. We could not make any money. We could not, it was just one issue, with just equipment and money, and can we make payroll, and so many things going wrong all the time that I was about to have a nervous breakdown. My kids were this high, and I couldn't do it any longer. So eventually in 2003, I sold the restaurant to get out, not the restaurant, I sold Now and Zen, the manufacturing company, to get out of debt. Not to make any money, but to get out of debt. And the day afterwards, after we sold every last piece of equipment and moved out of this huge facility, I got on a plane to go on a family vacation to France, and I fainted halfway over the Atlantic Ocean. Never fainted in my life, and my husband, and they were going to turn the plane around, fly back to New York, and my husband said, she just needs a rest. And I was so grateful, because I would have been pissed as hell had I woken up in New York instead of in France. So anyway, so it just seemed like I had tried so many things that were so promising, and yet nothing ever went right. I could never, just so you know, all those years that I had the restaurant and Now and Zen, the business, I never paid myself. I never took a paycheck. All the revenues went to pay employees, and part of the reason I kept the business going was because people needed jobs. I couldn't lay them off. That wouldn't have been right. And so we had to keep the business going. We had to keep loaning money, putting our own money, the partners and I had to keep putting money into the business so we could keep people employed. And that is really how it went for many, many years. It appeared to be very successful because we were in all these stores, but we were not at all successful financially. Next slide, please. So anyway, I sold the restaurant, I sold the business in 2003, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And my husband, who had a law firm, said, why don't you come here, work for me, keep the books? And I did, and for a little while. And eventually, I got involved in real estate. And my husband kind of got me into that. And for the first time in my life, I started making serious money. I was making money, I had no idea. It was like Play-Doh, not Play-Doh, like play money. It was like Monopoly money. It didn't seem real because there was no creation of real value. I wasn't making anything and selling it or creating anything. I was just making money off of transactions, basically, is really what it was. But I was making tons of money. And at first it was really fun. It was like, wow, I can buy this, and I didn't feel bad. But I started getting really depressed. I got so depressed. It was a soulless descent. I mean, seriously, I got to a point in my life where it was like, well, I go to work, I come home, and have a glass of wine, watch TV, and it was like, is this it for the rest of my life? And I turned 50 years old, And I thought, well, this is it. This is the long downhill from here. I'm going to be rich. I got a big house. My kids are going to all go to college and we won't have to worry about it. And I'm going to be depressed the rest of my life. And I realized I couldn't do that anymore. That it didn't matter how much money I made if I wasn't happy, if I wasn't creating value, if I didn't feel like I was doing something that was good for the world, then it made no sense. What was the point? It just didn't matter at all. And so eventually, next slide please, I decided that I needed to do something again. Does anyone know what a burpee is? Yeah, how many of you do not know what a burpee is? Okay, I'm going to show you. Well, anyway, the way it works in life is, well, this is my motto, life is like a burpee. Here's a burpee. Now, it's an exercise. It can be a very good exercise, and you can get really tired doing it, but this is what you do. Okay. So basically, you're going to fall throughout your life. No matter what you do, you fall. And what do you have to do? You got to not just get back up, you got to jump back up. And then you got to clap at the top as loudly as you can, because you're probably going to fall again. And then you got to jump back up and clap again. And you just got to keep going and just get through that set, because life is that set. And if you don't get back up, you're just going to be down on the ground. So it doesn't matter how hard that set of burpees is. It doesn't matter how hard you fall. You've got to just jump back up as high as you can and give a big loud clap at the top. Because at some point, if you are that creator, and if you are that soldier, and if you are that ambassador, those claps will add up into something spectacular. And your life, you will fulfill your dreams. And so I just had to keep doing it over and over and over again. Next slide. And what happened again? I became a born-again chieftain. Yes, I did. So what happened was, eventually, I told my husband, screw it. I'm not doing this real estate stuff anymore. I don't care if I fail again. But I'm in my mid-50s, and if I don't try yet one more time, I'm going to be at the bottom of my burpee and never be able to get back up again. So I decided one last time to try, give my spin, my hand at something. And I wrote a book called Artisan Vegan Cheese, because I had been playing around with vegan cheeses for years anyway. So I put it together in a book. And that book, for the first time in my life, even though while I was writing that book, the entire time I kept thinking, who am I kidding? You know, I had written several other books, but they did okay, but not great. And I had a restaurant, and I had that horrible start with a Yakuza in Japan, and then the restaurant, and the Now and Zen, and everything else, and nothing had ever gone right. And I figured, who am I kidding to do this? But I'm going to if I don't do it, all I'm going to be doing is sitting on a pile of play money, of monopoly money, and what's the point of that? So I wrote the book, and it became very, very successful. And then eventually I started Miyoko's Kitchen. I don't know what happens. I feel very, very blessed, because people just surrounded me. People like Seth Tibbett of Tofurkey, and Billy Bramlett, who started Wildwood, and Billy Bramlett found John Breen, our phenomenal CFO, without whom we wouldn't be where we are today. I was just blessed being surrounded by wonderful people who came together, wanted to invest money to create a vegan cheese company that could provide people the reason to transition from vegetarianism to veganism as the last hurdle. Because I have never, ever heard the complaint before, oh, I go vegan, but the cheese. I've never heard that before, not once. I heard it maybe today for the first time, but anyway, it seemed like it was the thing to do. And this time around, it's not just the company itself, but it's the new V-Conomy that I spoke about earlier. The timing is right. This is the time when everyone must, if you have a product, if you have an idea, you must put it to the test. It's a moral imperative because it is what you can do to help improve this world. Because if we don't create value, there is no point. Real value comes back to us when you create value. You can only feel valued when you create value. If you don't do if you just make money off of something that has no meaning for you whatsoever, or off of transactions or off of the financial system, you will feel empty. And we as vegans, more than ever, have to do what we can to change the world in our own small way, in our own small part. So becoming a chieftain was extremely important for me, and there is an equally important role for you. Next slide, please. So, I welcome you to Miyoko's Kitchen. Keep changing slides, please. Where you can enjoy double cream chai, High Sierra Rustic Alpine, Loire Valley. You can try all of these. Keep going. Mount Vesuvius Black Ash, they're all available outside. French-style winter truffle, aged English sharp farmhouse, smoked farmhouse, double cream garlic herb, where life is always a party. Next slide, please. Now, one of the questions that's often asked to me is, are you a vegan or are you plant-based? And do you call your products vegan or do you call your products plant-based? What's the difference? Plant-based is on the way to vegan, in my opinion. It's about health usually. And that's how I started out my life. It doesn't matter actually how you get to veganism, or whether you come from the plant-based route or you go straight to vegans from a vegan standpoint. When I became a vegan initially, I became vegan for health reasons. So I would call that plant-based. Not that I really care, but I was a cheating vegan because I was lured by that smell of cheese. And I would go to those fancy parties and there'd be some cheese and wine out there, and I'd look over my shoulder, are the vegan police looking? And then I'd sneak a little piece of brie or something. Because I did not know about the implications of dairy farming. I didn't know how dairy cows were treated. I didn't know that in order to produce milk, you had to keep the cow pregnant and have it give birth. That you had, in order for that cow to get pregnant, it had to be inseminated, and not by a bull together in a natural fashion, but in a violent form of rape. And then that you would have to take the baby calf away upon birth so that we in turn could drink the milk of the cow. I didn't know any of this. And so it just looked to me like, a bunch of happy cows grazing in the grass, right? And that was like no big deal. And so to me, it was not a problem to cheat once in a while. Today I know, and I've known for a while. And so that is why I think it is so important as a vegan business owner to put vegan on the product, to call our products vegan and not just plant-based. That to hold that vegan banner high. I don't want to be afraid. I mean, so many people who have vegan businesses are afraid to insult people, to offend people by using the V word. So they soften it by saying, well, it's plant-based. Well, of course it's plant-based. But we must stand for a word that means so much more, because it is the only thing that's going to save this world. It's the only thing that is not only going to save our own health, but the lives of billions and billions of animals and the planet. It's so important, next slide please, to hold the vegan banner high and be an evangelist for the movement. And we can do that through our businesses. We don't always have to be out there as an activist on the front lines in a protest or in a march, but we can do it through our products, the things that we make, by making them available and making it so that there is no more excuse not to go vegan. So that because there's absolutely no deprivation anymore for anybody. Everything is available in a vegan version, and we must call our products vegan. We don't need to offend. We just have to make a very, very good product that anybody and everybody will enjoy. So, thank you. So I hope you'll all join with me in holding the vegan banner high, evangelizing in your own way, in making this a better place for everybody, ourselves, the animals, and Mother Earth itself. Thank you so much today. Do we have time for a few questions? Okay, we have time for a few questions if anyone has any. Yes?
So I was recently laid off, and I thought I would like to do something with my passion. But how do you, I don't know what. So that's a hard part.
It is hard, and I didn't know either for a long time, and I don't know necessarily that the answer could come to you in, overnight or something. It took me many, many years. I mean, I'm almost 60, and I'm only just beginning my life, I feel. I feel like it's only now that I'm actually doing something that's effective, that's beginning to work. It just took really I've been at it for 30 years. I've been doing burpees for 30 years, essentially. So I don't have the answer for you, but I think the first thing is to realize you want something, that you do want to do something with your life, that's not just going to work for somebody else. And it's going to materialize, it will actualize, but that if that passion is there. I really do believe that, and the best of luck to you. Yes?
When I was vegetarian, I ate a lot of cheese pizzas, and I'm kind of waiting for that cheese pizza now, or any pizza that's vegan.
Come by and try our fresh buffalo mozzarella. I have a sample. It melts and bubbles and browns just like, yeah. Has anyone had our buffalo mozzarella on pizza? It is very, very good. Yes, no artificial aftertaste or anything. Yes.
What
Yes.
is the temperature of your cheeses? Are any of them raw?
Yes, several of them are raw. They are cultured, and some of them are heated, but many of them are raw.
Which ones are raw?
The double cream chive, double cream sun-dried tomato, double cream garlic, black ash, herbs de Provence, and fresh Loire Valley. Are there more questions in the audience about anything vegan fashion? No. Yes. I'm sorry?
I was watching Jeopardy.
Yes.
And Turkey was an answer on Jeopardy.
Unturkey was an answer on Jeopardy? That is hilarious. Wow, that's funny. People, the funny thing is I sold the company in 2003, the company that bought Nowens and went out of business 3 or 4 years later, and so they stopped making the Unturkey, and then someone immediately created a website, I did not, called unturkey.org, and the tagline is, the Unturkey is gone forever, and whoever is responsible shall pay. I thought that was hilarious. I loved it. And then, but anyway, I have a video on YouTube of making the Unturkey, so you can watch that and learn how to make the Unturkey. I do have people, even today someone came up to me and said, are you going to make the Unturkey again, or is it just going to be cheese? No, I don't think we're going to make the Unturkey right now, but you can make it yourself. Yes.
I just tried the black ash for the first time.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Thank you.
I love some of the others, but first time for black ash, what gives it that wonderful flavor?
So what we do at Miyoko's Kitchen is we borrow from all these European techniques for cheese making. And one of the European techniques is to either dust or coat cheese in ash. And ash alkalizes the surface. It gives it sort of an earthy, musty flavor. And it actually changes the texture of our cashew-based cheese. So that's really what gives... if you haven't been to our booth, have you all checked out our cheeses? The Mount Vesuvius black ash is an aged cheese coated in an ash that comes from France. It's a vegetable ash, and so that's really what gives it the flavor. Yes, Susan. Oh yeah, Vegan Mashup is a show that I'm on that runs on PBS. It's on the Create channel. Thank you. It's a vegan cooking show produced by Delicious TV, and it features 3 chefs. I'm one of them. Terry Hope Romero is another, and Tony Fiore is another. Season 3 will start airing next spring, I believe. But I think seasons 1 and 2 are still playing sometime. Someone said it was on this morning or something. So I'm not sure exactly what, I can't tell you what channel. It's on your local public. It's on KQED in this area. I think it's the Lifestyle KQED channel. I think it's like 171 or 3 or something like that, Comcast. But anyway, it's available in 228 million homes. And it's been aired 17,000 times on TV. So it is available. Doesn't mean 228 million homes watch it. They definitely do not. So anyway, yes.
Can you just generally just tell us about the creation process of your recipes? How did you come up with that?
So I think about food constantly. I'm always thinking about food from a food science standpoint. I'm not a food scientist, but I'm very analytical. Like, what is it that gives the sharpness of cheese, or what is this from, and what is that from? So I think about it all the time, and that's really how I think about it. I think about flavors that I want to capture, and then I try to figure out how can I do that in a plant-based fashion. So it's sort of just, and then that's the fun part, and then the hard part is getting in the kitchen and just testing and testing and testing again. Sometimes it comes together in my first try. Other times it'll take 30, 40, 50 tries before I get something right. So that's the soldier part. There's the creator and the soldier. Aliona.
Is the new cheese sauce going to become part of the regular collection?
Is the new what?
The cheese sauce?
Oh, the cheese sauce. Yes, it might be. We're trying to figure out how to package it. We're not sure how to market it, how to package it. We're sort of discussing that. Yeah. But hopefully all the way in the back in the red dress.
I've been vegan for 20 years, and I just want to thank you so much for creating your product. I have tried several vegan cheeses, you can imagine, 2 decades. Yours structure, yours is amazing.
Thank you.
Most importantly, I got your book. I am still trying to figure out which recipe is best to work with, and I had some success, so thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And you can always reach me if you've got a question at info@miyokoskitchen.com. Yes?
Yeah, I love your fashion. Where did you get your shoes?
Oh, so these are J41s. That's a line that's made by Jeep, and they do a lot of vegan shoes. And I got these because I can walk all day in them, and they look good too. So, and if you're short like me, you need a little, you need a little height. So. No, I don't think so. I don't have that kind of talent, but I am going into the shoe buying world. For years, I don't know. I'm making up for all the years I didn't have shoes, and so every time I was just at the PETA Gala, the 35th PETA Gala, and at the silent auction, I won a $500 gift certificate to a vegan shoe site. Yes. So I'll be shopping. Actually, I'm going to get some shoes for my husband and my brother, vegan shoes for them. So, are there any other questions? Yes.
Since you've written 3 cookbooks, I'm just curious what's some of the key things to do to get them published.
Oh, okay.
I'm curious about that.
So actually, I've written 4 books, and by the way, I will be doing a cookbook signing right afterwards at the bookstore out there, and I've got 4 of my books there. The first is the Nowens and Epicure, and then Japanese cooking, and then artisan vegan cheese, and then my most recent book, The Homemade Vegan Pantry. There's lots of different ways to do it. I've always had a publisher. I have 2 publishers now, and I guess the market is getting. If you have a blog or something like that, the first thing I would do if you don't want to self-publish is get an agent. It's really becoming very, very competitive, and have a really don't write the whole book. Just have a really, really solid idea, a sample chapter. You don't need to take your photos because the publisher will want to design it their way. Unless you want to self-publish, that's a whole other route. I don't know anything about self-publishing. I've never done it. But have a really, really well-written introduction. You should go to find an agent or find a small publisher and find out what their needs are. Every single small publisher will have their own list of the things that they're looking from an author. And some you can pitch to directly. There is a new company called Vegetarian Publishers. Robin Robertson, who's a cookbook author, started that company, and they actually take direct submissions. A lot of publishers don't take direct submissions, so then you need to find an agent. But if you're just starting out, I would definitely suggest starting out with a smaller publisher that you can deal with directly, so you don't have to pay the agent any fee at all. If you're more established and you want to go with a bigger publishing house, then I would recommend an agent. Okay. Yes?
Yeah, I was curious, you said you had 3 children. Were they raised vegan, and have they stayed vegan, or how do you go about raising kids vegan?
So, I mean, when I was starting out, it was really, really hard for me to put my foot down. I mean, even when I was pregnant with my first child, so I've been mostly vegan for, I don't know, 5-6 years at the time. He's 25 now. I would occasionally think, God, maybe, it's fine if I'm vegan, but maybe I should be taking some yogurt for him. And so a few times I ate yogurt or something because I wasn't sure if I was doing the right thing by being vegan. I just didn't know enough. And so I didn't raise him as vegan, I raised him as vegetarian. And then by the time the second one, the third one came along, we maintained a vegan household. But I couldn't put my husband wasn't a vegan. And so without that unified front, it was really hard for me to say, okay, you can't eat cheese. And I also felt like, well, if I deprive them when they're out and about at a birthday party of, pizza or a birthday cake, then there's going to be a backlash, which I had seen with some other friends. And so I was kind of wishy-washy there, and I tried to indoctrinate them as much as I could, but I let them choose what they wanted to eat, as long as it wasn't meat or flesh outside the home. And 2 of my 3 children are now vegan, and my son is not, my oldest. And, you have to let people make their own choices. Yeah. So he's vegan now too, but he wasn't at the time. Yeah. So it's a long, long process, and you cannot judge and you can't be critical of people as they're making the journey. Even if it's 1 meal a week that they give up meat, hallelujah to them. And that's the message. It's not all or nothing. It's every little baby step. You applaud their effort, because if you don't, you're going to push them away, and they will never, ever see your viewpoint. Criticizing people does not work. Invite them over with how delicious your food is. That is more effective than anything. Oh. Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't know, okay, we got 5 more minutes. Yes.
Will you be opening like a cheese shop or a cafe by your factory?
Oh, we would love to open a cheese shop or a cafe. That was in the plan, but right now, the area that was going to be designated for a retail shop is our shipping e-commerce area now. So we're just too busy. We are going to be expanding. We're going to be looking for a bigger plant that we can launch in 2017. So eventually we may, be at a point where we can open a retail shop. But right now, that's a whole other business model, and we're focusing just on creating more wonderful new products and getting them out nationally. And we're hoping by 2016, by the beginning of 2016, we'll be filtering throughout most of the United States and Whole Foods and other natural food retailers. So that's what we're focusing on. Yes?
So you've got like the creator side where you can do the creative stuff, make the food, make the flavors, but then you also have the business side of running the business. How much do you enjoy or not enjoy the business aspect of it?
Well, when I had Now and Zen, I had virtually no I had the big production. We had up to 50 employees on the floor at one point. Rough average was about 20. And in the office, I had an assistant. I had a production manager. I had like a bookkeeper. I had one other assistant and myself. And I did everything. I did most of sales and marketing and running the business. It was a learning experience for me, and I loved it in a way. But when I got too involved in the business aspect, I became sort of obsessive compulsive about things, and it took away from the creativity, actually. So I think, to make a really successful business, even though I love all those aspects, you got to put together a really good team, and you have to delegate, and you have to let people do their job. And I'm not the best at all of these things, and I don't want to be. I think I have my strengths, and I'm very well aware of the things that I'm not very good at, and that's why we have brilliant people like John Brain right there. If you want to do something, it depends on where you want to be. If you want to be a mom and pop shop, or if you really, really want to grow. But if you want to scale for growth, then you got to get the right team, and you got to delegate and let people do their job. Yes?
How do you go about learning about food science?
I read a lot. So to make cheese, to learn how to make vegan cheese, I read a lot of dairy cheese cookbooks. And I read about different cultures of molds and enzymes and how they work, and pH and alkalinity, and then I tried to figure out, how can I make this work? I'm not an expert at all, but we have this issue all the time about, we feel like we need to hire a biochemist because we have, or microbiologist, because, especially with cheeses, because we have various issues that come up, and we think, well, maybe we could do better. And we're going to be hiring one, actually. We're going to be hiring a bona fide food scientist, because I love food science, but I'm not a food scientist. I just used my own analytical skills to figure things out, but I obviously can't figure out everything. So, we haven't had the money, but we are going. That's in our budget to hire a bona fide food scientist soon. Yes.
Raw cheeses, are they soy or are they rice milk, and which ones are non-soy but raw? And what do you use then if it's not dairy? What do you use?
Well, they're mostly nut-based, cashews, but you can come by our booth and read the ingredients.
Yeah, I asked them, and they said that none of them are raw at your booth.
No, that's not true. There's 6 of them are raw out of the 10. Yeah.
How much experience do you want your food scientist to have?
Oh. Why don't you come and talk to me? We want someone super smart, willing to work hard, and with some sort of science degree. Come talk to me or John. Yes?
How hard do you think it is to make the cheeses at home?
So if you get my book, Artisan Vegan Cheese, there are some guidelines. We're actually going to be doing a revised edition of the book that will go into much more detail to help prevent some of the pitfalls that certain people have experienced with the book. But you can make a lot of the cheeses, but on the other hand, there are certain environments that are necessary for certain things to happen, for the culture to grow or to age the cheese. And so we can do more at our facility because we have a designated aging room for aging cheeses. We have a controlled environment, basically, which is harder to achieve at home. But you can make excellent vegan cheeses at home as well, too. Yes. Yes?
Did you go to culinary school?
I did not go to culinary school, and I wanted to, actually. I was always interested in cooking, but I'd been a vegetarian since I was 12. And at the time, the only culinary school you could go to, back in the 70s or 80s, was one where you'd have to slice off some I just didn't want to do that, so I never went to culinary school. My culinary education is from my parents' Time Life Good Cook series, and reading both volumes of Mastering the Art of French Cooking. Yes? Last question.
How do you handle criticisms both from non-vegans and vegans who have different points of view?
All the time. I handle them all the time. We just had a nice article on Slate.com, and I think it was Slate.com, or maybe it was The Guardian. Slate, and there were, dozens and dozens and dozens of negative comments about vegan cheese. We were called it, vegans are irrelevant whack jobs and this, that, and the other thing. So yes, and I get vegans calling me and telling me how gross my cheese is, and it's just how it is. I mean, you put yourself out there in the public sphere, people are going to bash you, and that is, you have to develop a thick skin for that. If you wilt easily, then, I feel fortunate that most people like our cheese, but occasionally there are people that hate it, and some people hate me, and I've gotten people send me hate mail too, telling me I'm not a true vegan, and I'm not this, and I'm not that, and why don't I just go and, why don't you just, whatever. I've had mean things said to me, and that's That's it. I mean, you just got to let it roll off your shoulder. That's it. So, thank you so much. We got the next presentation coming on here.